All right, we're going to talk about mapping out requirements in this video. A lot of times people get worried that having all of your requirements on small little cards is just going to get confusing because you can't really tell how it all fits together. Each one is independent, so it's confusing. How will we ever know how it fits together? Well, I'm going to show you a technique that I've used with organizations dozens of times. And every single time I've done it, people come out going, wow, that I understand this system better than I ever have before. As a matter of fact, I did it with a group of folks from the Department of Licensing here in Washington State. They were from 3 different agencies, and they had been um, historically not on the same page, shall we say. Their departments were at odds at times because they all had requirements that they needed to get done, and theirs were always the most important, right? Every person's thing is the most important thing. I brought them all together in a room, and we worked together on developing the story map for their entire project that would integrate all 3 of their groups and all 3 of their requirements into one thing. And it really helped them see how their products fit with everybody else's. So here we go, talking about mapping out the requirements. So story mapping is an approach where you break down the work not onto actual story cards, but into just big chunks. So the first thing that we do is we talk about um, the backbone. What are the big chunks of things that we'll be talking about? And I like to use Amazon as a great example because everybody's been to the Amazon website. You know how it flows. So in this case, the backbone would be big categories of things like a landing page, searching, filtering, checkout, and uh, I guess this would be the cart here, and then this is final checkout. So you get the idea. Those are just the big chunks of work, and that's what we call the backbone of the story map. So now underneath that, we're going to list out the different features of the system, and we'll be thinking about that by way of thinking that the things on the top are the things that are most frequently used, and the things towards the bottom are less frequently used. So as a group, we would all be brainstorming. What are all the features that we need? We need this, we need that, we need the other. We'll often use persona cards and walk through a persona to go, okay, how would this person go through this system? How would that person go through the system? With the Department of Licensing people, we had different people. We had one person who was registering. They were a kid, right? They were getting their permit. How did they go through the system? And then they passed their tests, and then they got their driver's license. So what were their touch points in the system? And then you had a person that moved to the state from another state. How did they flow through the system? So you're coming up with all these different ways that the person would use the system, and all the features that they would need when they were using the system that way. Think of a person with a motorcycle license. The system also included things like boating licenses and trailer licenses and all of that kind of stuff. So it was all integrated into one system. They brainstormed all these things out, and then they put them up on the wall in order of the flow. So horizontally is the flow as the user would use the system, and vertically is the frequency at which how frequently they would use the system. So you'd end up with something like this, a bunch of sticky notes up on there that would show you how frequently someone was using something and how the flow went to the side. So if you thought about it on the Amazon example, this would be your just basic landing page, right? Where you type in Amazon.com and it comes up with the page that shows all departments and searching the search bar and maybe some suggested things and whatnot. But the very basic here would be the the search bar and all departments. Down here would be on that landing page, you'd have, special offers or search recommendations, those kinds of things. It's not as frequently used. It's not as important as having that main search bar. And then, the under search criteria here, you would have probably search by title or search by author, whichever statistically is more popular. And then you'd have whatever search by subject, which is maybe less often. Search by product, because they started out with mostly books and now we're different products. And way down here is maybe search by ISBN. It's something that you actually want to have, right? The book number that's on the back of your books, you need to have that ISBN search, but you don't necessarily use it every time. But some people really want it, so it's down here. It's seldom used, and it's in the search system span here. See that right there. And then you would move on to the reporting and filtering things. So you'd filter by X, Y, or Z, and the different. So those, filter by most relevant would be first. Filter by price would probably be second if we have like a bunch of them down here. You get the idea. And then you'd have the checkout things and various versions of what you would need. Pay by credit card, or pay by Amazon points, or pay by PayPal, or so. I don't know what is the most frequent and least frequent, but you get the idea. So you would show it all on there. When you're doing this and you have multiple people with multiple interests, like I had with the Department of Licensing, they had to negotiate on where things stood in relationship to each other. And it was remarkable. It took them 3 days to do it, but it was very large. The next thing you look at here is the walking skeleton. So that first row of things is what we call the walking skeleton. If you just were to implement that one row of things, you could have a system that worked. It would be bare minimum. It wouldn't be flexible, but it would be what we refer to as an MVP, minimally viable product. You might want to write that term down, MVP, minimally viable product, because that's a commonly used idea. It's the minimum set of features that you can go to market with and have your customers go, wow, that works. I can see how that works. The other great thing about using this model is this next row, or maybe you take this one with it or something like that, that becomes your second release. And then your third release is these things down here. It makes doing your release planning really, really easy. What normally becomes a debate of, oh, is it this? Should we have that? We should have this feature in, not that feature. When you can look at it this way and say, and you've already agreed with how important this feature is and how unimportant other features are, right? Where they sit on that priority list, the release planning becomes really a no-brainer. And I've seen groups that had debated for a long time on what was in or out of a release plan. And this model just makes it super easy to roll those things out. So I told you I did this with the Department of Licensing, and want to be really clear. These are not stories. They're not story cards like we talked about in the requirements and story cards sections. These are features. They're a high-level, gross card that really is about the ideas. So you could do them with features if your project was small enough, and that would be great. But generally, you do story mapping on something that's bigger than the breadbox that would just have these be stories. You have something that's pretty darn big, like the Amazon site, for example. You could map the Amazon site, and then each one of these little gold cards would have multiple stories that make it up. And then within that, you would prioritize which stories are more important and which are less important, and which can we have saved for later kinds of things. All right. So I told you I did this with the Department of Licensing, and here is the actual chart for the Department of Licensing when they did it. You can see that their backbone here was long. Remember, we're integrating 3 different systems. It actually went down right about here where the edge of the picture is. There's a wall, and the wall went this direction. And there were 3 or 4 more sheets that went that direction. But they put it all in these large sticky notes, and they had them on those sticky notes. They would actually take the sticky notes and move them around when they were trying to share the charts. So they numbered all these. They actually numbered all the cards so that if they fell off, you could get them back in order. But you can see the numbers here that are associated with each one of the panels. But so you can see how this is their backbone, and the backbone's up here, and then this is the walking skeleton, this first row. If they implemented all those things, they would be good. Each one of them has a description on it of what the feature is that you're trying to that they're trying to create, and then they would go take this. When they went to it, you can see here where it has 2, 3, 5. Those were stories that features that they pulled off and were starting to turn into stories. So they had that as a placeholder so that they could come back to it later. Now we're going to stop right here just for the sake of not making this too long. And we'll start up again, going into a little bit more detail with story splitting and making them smaller, because you can see from here, you might take a piece that's a feature and break it down. And the question is, how do you break down a story into the smaller components? There's a lot of different patterns, and we'll go through those in the next video. All right, see you there.